Happy Monday, FA Nation. My name is Justin Fensterman, along with James Grande, and it's time to talk some DFS NBA. It's a live stream preparing you for tonight's 7-game slate. Jimmy Graham, how are you?
Good, man. Happy Monday, Fensty. Kickstart the week. You and I here on the live stream. I couldn't be happier to be on here with you, Fensty, to kickstart my week.
Yeah, I noticed you hesitated by saying that, so I'm just letting you know that I noticed that. Don't think I can't pick that up. But as always, we have to start our week going over the tornado of injuries going on around the association. So, Grande, let me mess with your mind just a little bit, because one of the players that we weren't sure whether or not he was going to play, Russell Westbrook, yes, he's going to play. But I'm seeing reports, Grande. It's one of your favorite types of reports. Minutes being monitored. Now, we've been burned by this before, my friend. So I got to ask you this. You see this report out there. You're a casual DFS player. Are you believing it? Are you staying off of him? Well, what are you doing?
Fensty, you see this?
See
what
that.
the new kids, the new era calls that the word cap is what they say. That is a cap, Fensty. That is a lie. I don't believe in monitored anymore. It's always a lie. It's always lip service. It's always BS. Yes, if he is monitored and he scores 20 actual points in the first quarter, Fensty, are they going to be monitoring him for the next 3 quarters? I don't think so. So I think we just kind of move forward with our Russell Westbrook shares if we like him, because, who's more revengey, Fensty, than Russell Westbrook? Who has more to prove in revenge narratives than Russell Westbrook? I'm not sure many people do.
What about John Wall?
I mean, yes, he has been personally hurt by the Wizards, but in terms of just what we've seen from Westbrook in games where he's yelled with another player, been moved from to team. I mean, he takes all this so personally. And I know John Wall's already spoken about how personal, this was kind of personal to him, and he still watches the Wizards games, and he obviously still cares about them. So he's going to obviously be amped for this game. But just in terms of Westbrook, this monitoring word, as you mentioned, I just cap, as the kids would say. It's cap.
Yes, and not because he's wearing a fantasy alarm cap right now. It has nothing to do with that. Joel Embiid, there's a big one here because it's regarding his back. He is currently questionable in an amazing matchup, so we're going to watch that. No Kawhi Leonard or Paul George for the Clippers tonight. No Kevin Durant for the next couple of games. Andre Drummond, big story today. A few big stories of the day, but this one being huge. Andre Drummond going to be held out, going to be benched essentially until he's either released or traded. And just to remind everybody, the NBA trade deadline, normally around this time, not this year, it's a month away. So for now, Jared Allen, lock and load. Victor Oladipo is going to be out. Mike Conley is still out. Lauri Markkanen is out. But Wendell Carter Jr., he's back, Mr. Grande. However, when it comes to the minutes restriction that I'm expecting for him, I'm still a little bit nervous, and we'll talk about that in a bit, Mr. Grande. Goran Dragic, he is out still. Mitchell Robinson, if you missed it, out for the next month and change with a fractured hand. Otto Porter Jr. is still out for the Bulls. Ish Smith is out with a quad injury for the Wiz. Doug McDermott, questionable with a knee injury. Marvin Bagley III is questionable with the calf injury. James Wiseman is still out. Taurean Prince is questionable with an ankle injury. Patrick Beverley, he's going to be resting tonight, so we're already down the 2 wings and Patrick Beverley, so we're going to be looking at the Clippers for value. Now, DeAndre Jordan, he is probable, but when I see personal reasons, I consider that tagged, so that's something that I'm going to keep on the noggin for a little bit. Shake Milton, he is going to be out for a long time, it's looking like. Rajon Rondo, he's still out. Garrison Matthews is active. And I'm just seeing this too. Rashawn Holmes for the Kings, now questionable with a knee injury, Mr. Grande.
Yeah, and another piece that just came across the wire, Fensty, Eric Gordon, groin injury officially out. So we have a lot of
the only one, Grande. PJ Tucker also out too with a quad injury.
Oh my lord! So, if you want to I think what's going to happen for Houston tonight, and if we just quickly pull up their their roster. I mean, we're obviously going to get John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins kind of as 1A, 1B tonight.
Jayshawn Tate.
We're going to definitely get Jayshawn Tate. I think we're going to see Daniel House enter the starting lineup tonight. And then I think at the 2, it's kind of a toss-up. It's going to be possibly Nwaba, possibly McLemore, possibly Sterling Brown.
Are we going against the James Grande credo? No stacking wings?
So, I mean, Fensty, like, there's a couple spots tonight where I think you can play about 3 guys on a team. And Houston feels like you can play 3 guys. I mean, it's Washington, right? This is the best spot on the board. Well, them and Sacramento, which we both want pieces of the opposite team, but it's going to be very hard not to play multiple Rockets. I mean, Wall is a staple for me, and I think that's probably a good transition into the point guard position, right? Wall is a staple tonight. I know he's a mid-tier play, but like you mentioned, how do we avoid John Wall against the Wizards tonight?
Well, I'll tell you this. People may look at last time out, and he didn't really have a good shooting night against them last time out. But that's why I think he's going to have even more of a chip on his shoulder because he's going to want it to be better.
But isn't it – you're not wrong, but it's something to note. He took 21 shots in 24 minutes. So, with John Wall getting a full complement of minutes here, because he'll play 30 minutes tonight, 30-plus minutes like he has been. I mean, Fensty, no Gordon, no Oladipo. We're going to get 25 shots from John Wall tonight. Like, we're going to get 25 shots. How about this? Over under 24.5 shot attempts for John Wall tonight.
Oh, that is a high number, Grande. What you're hammering the over? You seem very confident. He's hammering the over, baby.
Hammering.
I hope, there's got to be props somewhere. I hope Adam Ronis is listening, wageralarm.com. Grande coming through. The point is, John Wall's in a good spot, and the salary being in the mid-7Ks on both sites is very affordable. We're talking about whether or not we go with his counterpart on the other side of the matchup, Westbrook, when all of a sudden this shady report comes out, or if we pay up for my guy tonight in the starting 5, and that's Kyrie Irving with no Kevin Durant. Mr. Grande, you got to love that usage bump with no KD on the floor.
Yeah, and that's going to ultimately be the decider, right? So I do think John Wall is going to be very popular, which he should be because the price tag is very tasty. The matchup is very tasty. But, I mean, how can you not also play Kyrie? Like, you could play Kyrie Wall on FanDuel. You could play them both on DraftKings as well. Kyrie is very cheap on DraftKings. 9K seems a little too dreamy, especially considering we get Sacramento on the flip side of this matchup. So Irving is elite as it gets. This top tier is really tough, Fency, because Kyrie is there. We have Westbrook and Tormans. We have Steph Curry on the slate going up against Cleveland. And Steph Curry, look, I'm not going to say he's at his best that he's ever been, but he's damn close, right? Like, Steph Curry is playing out of this world right now, and he didn't even get featured in the playbook. So I think this top tier is really elite. I do agree Kyrie is going to be the chalk. I think a nice pivot is to go to Steph Curry or Westbrook, maybe even De'Aaron Fox on the flip side of Brooklyn, because we know how bad that Brooklyn defense has been.
Yeah, let's update some news, Mr. Grande, because first, Wendell Carter Jr., like you and I just predicted, it's looking like he's going to be on a restriction. He's going to be on a bit of a restriction. I'm staying away from that. If he comes through as a volume play, I won't be on that train. I don't want to mess with that. However, another piece of news, the Rockets lineup is out, and Nwaba is going to be starting Tate, Cousins, Wall. Oh, man.
Why?
This is borderline micro ball 2.0 right here.
Why are they starting David Noah? Like,
it doesn't make sense.
I mean, so I still think you could put some stock into Sterling Brown off the bench because he's been playing 25 minutes or so off the bench every single night, right? So right. I think there is merit to rostering Sterling Brown. He's gone for 20-plus fantasy points in 3 of 4, and it's Washington. I really think that's a matchup we should look to exploit. But I think Daniel House instantly becomes a really good value. I think Jayshawn Tate becomes a really good value. He's 4,600 on DraftKings. So I guess David Nwaba too. I don't want to play David Nwaba, but if you're gonna tell me David Nwaba, who's $3,600 on DraftKings, and what's his FanDuel price? His FanDuel price, where's he positioned? He's a point guard. 4,400. This is wild. Not playing him on FanDuel, but I think we should consider Nwaba on DraftKings at 36.
There you go. A lot of value now on the Rockets. A lot of players out, shockingly, there. Let's talk about any other value point guards that you like tonight. You just, I guess, mentioned on FanDuel the ultimate value point guard. So, I mean, is there anyone else maybe a little bit more expensive where your confidence factor is a little bit higher?
Yeah, I mean, I think Reggie Jackson ultimately becomes one of the better values at point guard. I mean, you mentioned it when you were rattling through the thousands of injuries we have tonight. Patrick Beverley sitting, Kawhi Leonard sitting, Paul George is sitting. And you know what? For what Reggie Jackson was last year, which was literally an afterthought after that trade, and so was the beginning of the season. Reggie Jackson was an afterthought. He has played pretty well, all things considered. So I do think Reggie Jackson, who averages just below a fantasy point per minute without Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, is appealing. Now, the question, Fensty, that I have for you, because it ultimately, I think it kind of hinges on playing Reggie Jackson or going all in on Reggie Jackson. Do you think, I mean, this Heat team isn't great, right? Like, this is not last year's playoff Cinderella.
No.
Do we think this game stays competitive? Do you think the Clippers, because the Clippers are pretty good without these guys, do you think the Clippers stay competitive? It's in LA, if that means anything to you.
I mean, I think that all of a sudden they're starting to see some true secondary scoring from guys like Marcus Morris. I think the rust has been shaken off. And I think that's something we're going to talk about a little bit later. When you have no all-star wings there, that's who you're going to go to. But all of a sudden, man, Lou Williams. I mean, where was this guy all season long? He was still stuck in, Magic City? I mean, seriously, Lemon Pepper Lou, all of a sudden in the last 2-3 weeks, he's come through. He loves his lemon pepper wings. That's why.
That's my new favorite. That's my new favorite nickname ever.
Yeah, but that's all of a sudden they're getting that secondary scoring that we were used to seeing them have last year. So I feel like now it bumps them up a little bit. And I feel like, I'm not saying that Vegas doesn't know, Vegas knows everything, but I feel like that's something that's not in the forefront and that we can take advantage of until all of a sudden everybody else in the world starts to catch on.
I agree. It's definitely interesting, and you, like you said, Vegas doesn't know everything, but it is only a 3-point spread, and it shifted from Clippers minus 5.5 over to Miami, the Miami side. They're now favored by 3. So just an interesting flip, but obviously just has to be brought up because when you don't have your 2 best players and arguably your 3 best defenders on ball, I mean, it's worth mentioning, especially when, Butler, Adebayo, Kendrick Nunn are on the other side. And I'll throw Kendrick Nunn because he's been damn good. So.
No, he has been. He's very appreciative of Goran Dragic. Let's give this guy a true designation, shall we? How many times is he going to be questionable? How many times is he going to be game by game? As someone who does the injury blog for FantasyAlarm.com, I'd appreciate not having to look every hour at the update of this guy. On to shooting guards, Grande. So is it all aboard the James Harden train tonight? Because, again, no Kevin Durant, and that bumps up both Kyrie and Harden. But as you know, 10K plus on both sites for Mr. Harden.
It is all aboard. And, I mean, if you saw the quote from Kyrie that Kyrie said, I looked at him and said, you're playing point guard and I'll play shooting guard. I mean, that kind of says it all. And it's been the case. We just saw 16 assists out of Harden last game. And now there's no Kevin Durant. So we're going to get not only point guard version of James Harden, but we're going to get the assassin-like scoring version of James Harden that's attacking the rim and taking 15-plus shots tonight. And it's against the Kings, Fancy. We sit on this live stream multiple times a week just hammering Kings.
Oh, but you know what's
hammering
better than hammering the Kings? Hammering the injured Kings front court. All of a sudden, I mean, they've got, half their front court that's questionable.
It could be Bielitsa and Whiteside tonight. Could be the starting front court, or Daquan Jeffries. So I do think that it is the Harden show. I think Beal is an interesting pivot because his price tag, especially on DraftKings, is like crazy affordable. 8,900. That we're looking at like 44.5 fantasy points, right, for 5x. He could give us 45 actual points and get us there just off scoring, considering Houston's playing God knows who, David Nwapa at shooting guard tonight. So I do think Beal is an interesting pivot, especially on DraftKings. I think 9,800 on FanDuel is a little too pricey, Fancy, especially with Westbrook in. But I would take a look at Beal on DraftKings if you're going to pivot off Harden.
Well, what about pivoting to Lemon Pepper Lou?
Oh, elite. He's John said it perfectly. He's a core play, and if there was going to be any injury designation on Lou, we would have gotten it already since the Clippers already released their injury report, right? So Lou Williams, 28 plus minutes in 3 of the last 4. The game that he didn't play 28 plus minutes, there was a blowout. So we're going to get extensive run out of Williams. He's going to start like he did last night. And although Jimmy Butler defense, he's not shy to shoot, and we know he's going to put forth a great effort. 30 and 10 from LPL last night. So Lou Williams, elite play, probably a core play in my eyes too.
So I got a question for you, Mr. Grande, and this is going to be the toughest question I ask you all night. But will you be my Denzel Valentine against the Pacers?
No, I'd rather go to Temple with you, Fensty.
Oh, it's over. I love that. I mean, they both still have their injuries, and we haven't seen a lot of consistent scoring in their midcourt. So that's why I ask. I'm looking for some value, man.
Yeah, and that's why I'd rather go to Temple, because he's the one who's kind of they've been playing leapfrog, right? And right now Temple's in the lead, and Denzel Valentine's trying to play catch up. I mean, Valentine was checked out after 1 minute of the game two games ago against New Orleans, and Temple went on and played 36 minutes, and now we've seen 28 plus minutes in 3 straight. So I'd rather play Temple if we're talking about value at shooting guard. But I also think you can go to the Bruce Brown route if you want to go shooting guard value. He started when there was no DeAndre Jordan, so I assume with no Kevin Durant, it's going to be quite similar, where we see Bruce Brown either start or play hefty minutes. So I do think there's some merit to going the Bruce Brown route as well.
Let's talk about the wings. We move on to the threes. And with that, Jimmy Butler is in a good spot. Obviously, no Paul George or Kawhi Leonard. So that's a good spot as well. I mean, you have to look. We've been talking a lot about the Nets, but you have to look at the Kings side of it as well. I mean, all of a sudden, John has him in the playbook. Harrison Barnes expected pretty low ownership and a nice price going up against the Nets because nothing's changed since last year. I love attacking the Nets front court.
Yeah, good old Harry B. So he's struggling the last few games, which, we don't love, but before the 4 games of just kind of subpar play, he was putting up 40 plus fantasy points. And I do think that's what we can get tonight against Brooklyn, like you mentioned. Let's face it. Is Jeff Green going to be on the floor guarding him? Is Joe Harris going to be on the floor guarding him? He has a plus matchup whichever way you slice it. So I do think Barnes is in play. I do think Butler is. So I think it's interesting tonight how many Clippers we decide to use, Fancy, because I think, as we mentioned, I said it up top, I think there's a couple teams you can use 2, 3, 4 guys from. I think Houston is one of them, and I think the Clippers are the other. But why that's interesting for Miami side is because if you play 3 Clippers, you think that this game is going to stay competitive. You want a bring back because, we've seen it multiple times this year, especially when there's been COVID-impacted games. The best example I have is the Miami Philadelphia game from earlier in the year. They played 8 guys or whatever the league, 8 guys, and Embiid went for 70 fantasy points and Miami kept it close with Gabe Vincent, Duncan Robinson, and those dudes. And everyone who had 4 Heat and Embiid won a tournament. So I think it's interesting if you're going to stack Clippers. I think you are put yourself in a position that you want to bring it back with a Heat player. And I think Kendrick Nunn we talked about is a good play, but I think Butler obviously stands out to me as the best of the bunch. There's no Kawhi to guard him. There's no Paul George to guard him. Marcus Morris in the past has been a good defender, as is Nicholas Batum, but we haven't seen that this year, and I think this isn't a matchup we can exploit with Butler if you're stacking Clippers especially.
Yeah, no, it's very good with the value on the slate now because of some of these injuries, and that's why we're constantly updating them. Speaking of value, any other value threes that you like tonight before we move on to the bigs?
Jingles is going to start again with no Mike Conley tonight. For some reason it's FanDuel, but for some reason he's under 5K on FanDuel. He shouldn't be, but you can play him in whatever format you'd like. I know Philly's been good defensively for a couple years now, but Ingles is just going to pick you apart with the passing from the wing, and he's also going to pick you up.
Joe Harris, who's the same price.
It's close. I think it's close. I think so. I think Ingles is more cashy, and just looking at the ownership, I think that speaks to it. Like, he's going to be higher owned if you want to be contrarian and play Harris. If you want to, I think Harris and Harden are a good combination because we saw 16 assists out of Harden. Let's say 5 of those go to Joe Harris threes. We're talking about 4.5 points on every one of those threes from Harris on FanDuel. So I think Harris is a interesting contrarian pivot off Ingles.
I just wish he did a little bit more than score. He almost made my starting 5. I had him planned to go in since yesterday, but then I said, how do I go after Joe Harris when all he's doing is really scoring when Jay Shaw 8 is there with all that's going on in Houston? I couldn't, the logic didn't make sense to me, but he's still been on my mind regardless. Let's move on to the big men here and talk about who we're spending up for, because like we talked about a little bit earlier, the Knicks have a little bit of a problem on their hands, and that's no more Mitchell Robinson. Right. So now, does that mean more plays for Julius Randle? Is Nerlens Noel actually going to get the rock more in the post, which I don't think is going to happen? And even better than that, and higher price, but under 10K, Domantas Sabonis against your Bulls. Now, I know they have Carter back, but even last year, too, going back, he's not that great of a defender anyway, so right. Sabonis should still eat.
Yeah, I think this is pretty easy, right? I think we take the savings on FanDuel where we get Randall at 8,600, and I think you play Sabonis on DraftKings for only $400 more, because I do think we've seen 20-20 out of Sabonis this year, and we've seen nearly 70 fantasy point upside, and we've seen 60 out of Randall a couple times. I am less likely to think he does that now with Derrick Rose. I just think Derrick Rose is such a high usage player. If they're sharing the floor at all, Randall's not going to be running that point forward that he does with the starting unit. So I will lean Sabonis on DraftKings and Randall for the savings on FanDuel, but I do think they're both very strong spend ups. But Fensty, I think the mid to value tier in this power forward spot is the moneymaker.
You know why that is? Why am I flexing? What player is making me flex like this right now?
I'm going to go with a Golden State Warrior. No? I know you're not flexing for Nerlens Noel because he has the skinniest arms in the world.
Bro.
Marcus Morris?
Allen.
They all Draymond flexes more than anyone, and he has no muscle.
I'm flexing because I think it's an awesome play tonight, Jared Allen. You're talking about you can fit Sabonis and Jared Allen. You know?
You can.
Jared Allen is 6'9" and 6'7" on these sites, and no more Andre Drummond.
I know.
This guy's going to see his minutes boosted to 30. He's the future.
As long as they keep this competitive, he'll play 30 minutes. That's been the problem. The last 3 games, Cleveland has been blown out of the water.
Who else do they have if they're not going to play Drummond? And you're right. You're 100% right. But now they're not playing Drummond, or at least they're saying they're not playing Drummond. I was talking with John and Pemba about this a little bit before. Let's say they lose one more big man. How do they not play Drummond? They don't have anyone left. Nance is hurt. Love is hurt. Now Drummond's not going to play. How does an Allen see 30 minutes regardless tonight? Yeah,
you're not wrong. And they do have JaVale, who played 15 minutes last night, and I do think JaVale in a blowout, last 2 games, 11 and 16 minutes. Not anything to write home about, but if Allen's going to play less than 30, that's because they're giving the blowout run to JaVale McGee. So I agree. I do think Jared Allen, from a fantasy point per minute perspective, is elite. but it's just about keeping this competitive. I don't like Golden State is obviously not the Golden State of old, but if we're getting this elite version of Steph Curry, and Draymond, who's been tremendous lately, playing that point center, point power, whatever you want to.
Well, he's the only game in town. They're facing similar issues. That's why I think there's a chance, because I think with Cleveland scorers in the backcourt, I'm not saying that they're going to completely take out Curry. Right. I think they can both keep up enough, because it's going to be Curry for the most part taking those shots. What JTA is all of a sudden going to take shots. Draymond's all they got. They're facing a big problem, the Warriors, as well. And when thinking about that, that's why, again, I just love this play so much. I just don't see how, outside of getting into major foul trouble or hurt, how Jared Allen doesn't see 30.
So, look, I like the play, and I do think this game could stay competitive, but you just have to factor that in a little bit. It's a 9.5-point spread. Cleveland played last night and got blown out of the water. I wonder what the team's thoughts are on this Drummond situation, and if they're going to rally behind the rest of the team. Like, all right, this guy doesn't want to be here. He obviously wants to be elsewhere. Let's show him what he's missing. There's some stupid, how teams rah-rah behind certain specific things. But, I just think it's worth noting, back-to-back, have been blown out a bunch. It is a 9-point spread. It is in Golden State. Just again, like Jared Allen, I like the player, I like the fantasy production. Definitely some things to consider, because when I can go down for $2,000 less and potentially play Nerlens Noel, who, wasn't great the other night, but Fensty, 32 minutes. That's the key. 32 minutes.
On that. He's the only game in town right now. Taj Gibson is not that true threat to me in the post.
Nope. I mean, and Taj Gibson's going to play, but he's going to be the backup center. And right. And I was evident.
You really made me not excited about Jared Allen anymore.
I'm sorry.
Fantasy alarm show. I was ready to get a Jared Allen tattoo on my heart, and you kind of just ruined Valentine's Day for me.
I'm sorry. Okay. Can I interest you in some Marcus Morris as well?
Yes, you can. You just stole my heart back. You're good.
Because Marcus Morris, as you alluded to earlier, is kind of coming into his own form, and let's not mistake who Marcus Morris is. He was averaging 20 a game last year with the Knicks before he was traded. 20 a game with the Knicks. He was their leading scorer on a team with Julius Randle. So
not only that, Grande, one of the deadliest 3-point shooters in the league.
Yeah, I mean, and he's showing it. 4, 6, 2, 3 the last 5 games. He's hit 2 or more threes. He's shooting 48% from 3 this year. I'm going to load up on Marcus Morris. I know he only played 26 minutes last night.
I have to pray, though. I have to say a little prayer. Can I say a little prayer quickly?
I would yes. Let's say a prayer together.
And not Emmanuel quickly, just very quickly. Marcus Morris, please grab 6 to 7 boards tonight. That's it. 6 to 7 boards.
Amen.
Thank you. You just said amen. So the prayer is over. So 6 to 7 boards is all we need tonight from him, Grande. None of that 3 crap. None of that 4. 6 to 7 boards. Can we get it?
I think we can. I think we can get it.
Miami's midcourt isn't that threatening. Again,
Agreed.
Something you mentioned before. They're not. Let's forget what happened last year. Last year was a lot about momentum with that Heat team. They were losing players and still winning. How does that happen? So this is a new year. They're not the same team. They've started off kind of crappy compared to what a lot of people thought they were going to start. And you know what? You can attack their midcourt.
You can attack their midcourt. You can attack their midcourt. This is Oprah handing out players to attack their midcourt.
Yes, and let's hand out some centers now, because someone who I obviously love, because we've been talking about the Knicks front court losing Mitchell Robinson. Clint Capella. Now, Let's talk about his price point over the last few weeks, because the minutes, it's dragged that price point.
Yeah.
However, James, all we need from him, and I'm giving this speech, the 25-minute speech. All he needs to do against crappy defenseless Nerlens Noel is play 25 minutes, and I'm thinking that you're going to have that 15 and 13 game.
Yeah, this is finally a price point I'm comfortable paying. I was never I never once played him over 8K. Not once.
And I got to give you credit, James, because we give each other a lot of crap, but I got to give you credit. You actually showed that to me. You said, dude, we got to get away from the rebounds. This guy's got to be able to score 20 points here and there. And now he has been.
Right. And the price point's dropping, which is generally not what happens, but I think the industry realized like, okay, he is not worth 8,500. Let's lower his price point and make it more appealing to the masses. And I think it is. And I do think this is a spot we can attack. And it's like a generally weak position today. I think center has been really loaded on previous slates, and that might be due to like Joel Embiid's injury right now. But I do think like if Embiid doesn't play, I mean, at the top, like Capella stands out, Gobert stands out for me, because then there's no Embiid on the other side of that Gobert matchup, right? So I think Gobert would be good in cash games. And then I think most people, Fancy, are going to gravitate to Boogie. I think it's going to be a Boogie night. He hasn't been great, and I know the minutes are probably like making people a little more reserved on like their love for Boogie when we thought it was going to be Boogie season, and it hasn't been. But John Wall always tried to get the Wizards to buy into Boogie. They never bit. They played together in Kentucky. I think that Boogie's going to kind of feed off John Wall's energy tonight. There's no Oladipo. There's no Gordon. He's the clear-cut 1B to Wall tonight's 1A. So I do think Cousins has a big night. I think we get a big night out of Cousins. And he's only 60. We're looking for literally 31 and 32 fantasy points on FanDuel and DraftKings respectively. So like we can play Nerlens on DraftKings, who's a center only, Jared Allen on DraftKings, who's a center only. For me, all roads lead back to Boogie.
Right. And that's fine. And the price point's great, like we talked about. So I'm cool with that. I mean, look, you would have to think that you'd rather pay for Boogie than Clint Capella, right? Even though it's weird to think, man, I'm a bit more confident in Capella, but everything that you just said about Boogie's matchup is very compelling. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, okay, I'll move it. Any other value center? I got you, Grande. Any other value centers that you like this evening? Because all of a sudden, man, look, DeAndre Jordan, I don't look at him anyway, but he's tagged, so I kind of want to keep him on his own island. Rashawn Holmes is now tagged. I mean, we really don't have much room to mess with.
I mean, like I think on DraftKings, the obvious value is Nerlens Noel. He's unfortunately a FanDuel power forward, which again still doesn't make any sense. We need to get our ducks in a row here. He's a center. He's going to play center. He's starting at center. Anyways, Kelly Olynyk, 31 plus minutes in 3 straight. I think he's a tournament play. Another piece of the puzzle. If you want to play 3 Clippers, bring it back with Olynyk as a GPP play. I think that's interesting.
I like that. He's been banging the boards too, which
he has been, and he's been missing shots, and he's still playing 30 plus minutes, which hasn't been the Spoelstra MO. Spoelstra generally would turn to a smaller lineup with Iguodala and Bam kind of as they're in their front court. But if you're going to play Olynyk 30 minutes and the shot starts to fall, I mean, we know how streaky he could be. He can literally shoot lights out, hit 6 threes in the first half, and you're like, where did that come from? But
you just identified Miami's problem. Not a lot of front court depth.
Not a lot of front court depth, for sure.
And I feel like that's contributed to their struggles. I mean, when you think about Jay Crowder as an individual, not much, but Jay Crowder as a piece, that's a whole different story.
Yeah, that was a bad loss for them. That was a bad loss. But yeah, I think that really, I mean, the Clippers guys are just, like, we just can't trust Serge Ibaka.
No, we can't.
Playing
I was
minutes.
going to say, I'm not going after him.
Like he played 29 minutes last night, Fensty. I think if we checked his log, I bet you that was the most minutes he's played all year long. And if it's not the most he's played, it is probably equal to the most minutes he's played all year. So
well, how about this? I'm looking in his last, let's just say 10 games, and he had 29 minutes. He had 28 on the 5th of February, and then it's a bunch of 23s and 26s.
He played 30 minutes on January 8th. That was the last time he's played 30 minutes. So yeah, I mean, and the last time he's played a back-to-back, he played 20 minutes on the second leg. So I think it's like interesting for tournaments, but I think we're going to be let down. I'm a little worried about the minutes. Maybe I'm wrong because there's no George, there's no Leonard, there's no Beverly. But
well, listen, we gave you the value guys in Kelly O and Nerlens Noel, and then we also have in the middle there we have Jared Allen. But then you also have your high price guys like in mid as well in Boogie Cousins, and then there's Clint Capella. There you go. I mean, that's I think where you're looking because of whenever the Embiid injury comes up, I don't like to, especially with my foundational piece. I don't like back injuries for big men because it's just so imperative in the post. One false move and you're done. That's it. And because of that, when it comes to Embiid, when I see that questionable tag with the back, that's why I'm immediately looking down that price tag on him.
Then I got a question for you then.
Yeah.
Because if Embiid doesn't play, we have a revenge narrative there, Fensty. Tony Bradley, big return. They're going to have the welcome back Tony on the Jumbotron. Do we pivot to either Dwight or Tony Bradley?
I mean, I'd rather go Dwight,
right?
Because he's volume. That's why volume points and boards. That's why. If I know that he's going to get 20 minutes flat, I'm going to get the points and boards. I'm going to get 8 of both at least.
Okay. I just want to because it is a big deal. Tony Bradley going back to Utah, so.
It's huge, man. I know it's the biggest story that's happened all day. Let me tell you, not like we've had any updates with Anthony Davis or anything like that. Don't know when we're going to see him take the court again. Thought it was an Achilles injury, calf injury. Love that reporting that we're having this year in sports.
Yeah.
Yikes. You can follow James on Twitter at _real_grinding. You can give me a follow at Fensty Sports. Get in the chat before lock it. Your lineup set. Always dominate. No other option. Just win.